This story shows us how a simple game turned into a horrifying event. "Rock, paper, scissors to see who hides first," Sean said with as much assertiveness a 12-year-old can muster. "Best 2 out of 3. "I know how to play the stupid game," I said, not so subtly showing just how annoying I thought Sean was. He was 2 years older than me and made a habit of reminding me of that fact whenever the opportunity arrived, especially in front of our mother. We had played rock, paper, scissors enough times for me to know Sean's opening move. I won the first round, he won the second, we tied a few times until I finally won the last round. "We'll hide first. Let's play big boundaries tonight." "No way, there aren't enough people to play big boundaries. Let's just do normal boundaries." Sean rebuked, apprehensive about the idea of extending the boundaries. "What are you, chicken?" I mocked, placing my fists on my hips and flapping my arms back and forth. "I told you to stop doing that. We're doing normal boundaries. I'm the oldest. What I say goes." He stomped his foot on the ground as his words crescendoed into a scream on the final word that left his lips. I rolled my eyes. "Chicken," I mumbled under my breath. "Whatever, you, Tommy, and Cam all count to 60 and no looking either." We ran off before Sean could protest my mumbling. I looked back behind me to see they had all turned around facing Tommy's bright yellow house in the center of the street. The neighborhood we lived in was shaped like a T, with Tommy's house being in the center of the top portion of the T. The top of the T was known as Cushing Saint. On the left side was a well-lit main road, and on the right was a side street that ran parallel to the main road. The long portion of the T was Park Ave, and was a dead-end street. However, at the end of it was a set of concrete steps that led down towards the parking lot of a convenience store. Cozy 2-story coastal New England-style homes lined both streets, each with large backyards, none of which were explicitly off-limits to us. However, there was one yard that nobody ever went to. One of the houses on Park Ave was implicitly off-limits. It was by far the biggest house on the street, and it was split off into 2 sections. The first section was the main house, which was situated atop a small hill that looked over the rest of the neighborhood, and the second portion was an in-law suite that was situated on the same level as the street. The windows had newspaper plastered onto them from the inside, making it impossible to see into or out of the house. The whole house was a faded shade of baby blue, with a black shingled roof that had missing shingles scattered about. The sides of the house were speckled with caked-on dirt, and yellow water stains lined portions of the siding of the house. The yard was off to the side of the house and was filled with grass that nearly consumed my 10-year-old body, reaching all the way up to my chest at some points, and in the center of the yard was a large pine tree that stood at the very least 20 feet tall. "30! Halfway there!" Sean shouted out into the neighborhood. I eyed the tree, sprinted over to it, and climbed it as fast as I could. I tried not to think about all the rumors that surrounded the house, after all. This was the last Saturday of the summer before school started up again. I couldn't hold anything back. I got about 12 feet up before I heard Sean scream out, "60! Ready or not, here we come!" From then on, I stayed completely still and utterly silent. I was always good at hiding. I had to be. I wasn't the fastest kid, and I didn't have the same stamina the rest of the kids in the neighborhood did. Sean was always faster than me. Tommy and Cam were only a year older than I was, but they had infinitely more stamina than I did. But in order to try and catch me, they had to find me first. My team had Patrick and Luke. Patrick was good at hiding, but not as good as me, and Luke was the only kid who could beat Sean in a race, and that angered Sean to no end. The two of them were always racing each other from one end of Park Ave and back, and Sean never once came within 10 feet of victory. It was no competition for Luke, and I always made sure I had him on my team. From outside the tree, I was nearly invisible, but I could see everything. I spotted Luke's hiding spot almost immediately. He was laying down in the mulch behind a small shed situated in the backyard across from me. The backyard he was in was enclosed by a 6-foot-tall wooden fence along the street, and a smaller 4-foot-tall fence that bordered the neighboring backyard, A small section of chain-linked fence acted as a gate into the backyard. I watched Cam walk down Park Ave. Towards the dead end, his head was on a swivel, scanning every nook and cranny that he could think to look in. Sean followed behind Cam, around 30 feet back, except he went into the backyard. I heard the chain-linked fence rattle as it opened and shut, and from Luke's reaction, so did he. "Hey, check that yard. I've got this one," Sean ordered Cam. He nodded and did as he was told. My eyes darted over to Luke. I watched as he got up, jumped the 4-foot fence, and sprinted past Cam. Cam gave chase and shouted out for Sean's help. Sean followed, jumping over the same fence Luke did. Over the next 10 minutes, I listened to Sean, Cam, and eventually Tommy coordinate their efforts to catch Luke. He was escorted by his captors to Tommy's front steps, where he was to stay until the rest of us were found, or until either Patrick or myself freed him from jail. Tommy, the slowest of the three, stood guard to make sure neither one of us could free Luke. From my perch, I scanned the surrounding area looking for Patrick, but he was nowhere to be found, probably in a backyard I couldn't see into. I began to look up into the sky, hoping to spend my newfound alone time counting the stars, but they weren't there, obscured by the clouds that so often hung over our small coastal town. With nowhere else to look, I began to look at the house. When I was younger, Sean teased me with stories about the house, how there was a witch who lived there. He'd say, "You better listen to me when Mom isn't around, or else the witch next door will come and grab you and eat you." Whenever Mom wasn't around, he would grab the milk carton from the fridge and show me the missing kid on the back, point towards the house, and tell me that those kids were stuck in that house. The witch was taking the kids for the sole purpose of eating them. I looked away from the house. Sean always lied. And besides, only babies believed in the witch, and I wasn't a baby, not anymore. I continued scanning the area. I looked back over to Tommy's front steps. Luke was still stuck in jail, and Tommy still stood guard. I heard footsteps slamming down against the asphalt. Tommy shot his eyes to his right, looking towards the sound of footsteps. He got low and spread his arms out, making himself as big as possible. Quickly, another set of footsteps bounded across the asphalt, much faster than the first set. "1, 2, 3, manhunt!" Sean screamed out, letting out an exasperated sigh. He proudly escorted a defeated Patrick to join Luke on Tommy's front steps. Tommy, Cam, and Sean gathered around and moved to the intersection of Cushing St. and Park Ave. Sean crafted their game plan, and he was far from quiet. "Cam, you start walking down Park Ave, Tommy. Stay here at the intersection and keep a lookout, and make sure he doesn't free Luke and Patrick. I'll check each backyard on Cushing Street. We'll meet back here in 10 minutes if we haven't found him." With that, they all followed their assignments. I watched Cam pace up and down the street, and I couldn't help but silently chuckle to myself as he searched all my typical spots, underneath decks, in overturned trash cans. But at no point did he ever look up in my direction. I couldn't see Sean except for when he passed by Tommy's house during his search, but beating him in this game always brought a smile to my face. Suddenly, that feeling of triumph and superiority came crashing down as I felt my stomach drop and my grip on the tree branch weaken. I had been watching Tommy, Cam, and Sean, but the thought of somebody watching me hadn't crossed my mind, not until my peripheral vision caught something truly chilling. In one of the windows facing me, through a series of pine needles, I could see a corner of the newspaper had been ripped off, and in its place was now a smile. An unnatural, crooked smile. The lips were uneven. They stretched across the face at different intervals, creating a slant. The teeth were yellow, and they each folded over each other, as though there wasn't enough space for all of them inside of the mouth. The top 2 front teeth protruded out in front of the lips, not too dissimilar to a rabbit. The smile vanished just as quickly as it had appeared, and in its place was the quick flash of light illuminating the whole side yard, but it was centered around the tree, centered around me. No, that couldn't be right. There was no way I was seeing things. I had to be seeing things. My mom always told me I had a wild imagination. There was no way for a light to have flashed. There was no way for me to see a disembodied smile. I closed my eyes tight and violently forced them open again. The newspaper was still ripped off of the corner. I looked away, although the smile had vanished. I couldn't bring myself to look back at the house again, at least not for a while. Sean always lied. There was no witch. Only babies believed in the witch, and I wasn't a baby. The flash had to be headlights somewhere around the neighborhood that just happened to hit the tree, right? It was headlights, and that piece of newspaper was missing before. I just didn't notice it before then. That smile was just my imagination creating something out of pine needles in the tree. I had nothing to worry about. "Cam, Sean, get over here!" Tommy screamed out into the thick, humid air, his eyes locked dead onto the tree, and even though I knew he couldn't see me, his eyes were staring directly into my own. Cam and Sean arrived. Tommy pointed up at the tree. "I think he's in there. I saw a flash of light come from the house, and I swear I saw an outline of a person in that tree." His finger trembled as it pointed up at me. "That's crazy," Sean blurted out. "He wouldn't go in that yard. He's too pussy." "Then explain the flash, Sean." "I don't know, Tommy. You're bored and you're seeing things. Don't bother us with anything stupid like that again. Cam, keep looking down Park. I'll keep going on Cushing. He's not clever. He's probably somewhere obvious we just haven't checked yet." Tommy was disheartened. He looked to his prisoners for affirmation, but found none. He continued standing his watch, but now he didn't take his eyes off the tree that I was in. I was stuck there. I knew I had no shot of outrunning any of them, and so whether I liked my spot or not, I was in it for the long haul. I was mad at Sean, and I wanted him to give up, prove him wrong, show him that I wasn't some dumb kid. In that moment, more stalwart than ever, I tightened my grip on the branches. They weren't going to ever find me. Tommy had his suspicions, but there was no chance he'd come into the yard to try and prove them right. Cam and Sean didn't believe him. I could stay here indefinitely. I took a small bit of pride in that fact. My spot had worked out. The feeling of triumph brought a smile to my face. I had to restrain myself from laughing with how perfectly everything had worked out. My pride was overwhelming, and as I felt it rising, I learned a very hard lesson. What goes up must come down. I heard the distinct creak of hinges ridden with dirt, dust, and grime echo out into the darkness of the night. It came from the house. Any and all ambient light was now blocked out by my eyelids as fear washed over my body. "The witch isn't real. Sean always lies. I'm not a pussy." These 3 sentences ran on a loop for what seemed like decades, but of course it was much closer to 30 seconds. I managed to open my eyes just enough to resemble something closer to a squint. I looked over at Tommy. His eyes were wide, and his gaze had left the tree and was now planted firmly on the house. I traced the path his eyes carved across the neighborhood to find what had caught his attention. The front door, which led directly into the side yard, was now slightly ajar. The ambient streetlight was sucked into the pitch-black darkness of the house's interior, leaving a small sliver of the filth-ridden floor just barely visible. I kept my eyes on the door, praying that it didn't open any further. The world stood still, and it was as though there were only a few things left. The door, myself, and the 30 feet of space between us. Everything else around me had faded far into the background. In this pocket of the world there was nothing. There was no sound, no crickets singing songs of the night, no rabbits making their journey through impossibly tall grass, and thankfully, nobody other than me, at least nobody that I could see. A light summer breeze thrust itself upon the house, causing the door to once again creak and open up ever so slightly more. Slam! Startled, I shuddered and nearly lost grip of the branches that kept me safe from the fall. I watched something dart across the beam of light. The beam had illuminated a dilapidated, sickly pale figure that was visible for less than a fraction of a second before the door quickly slammed. After the slam, I heard the sound of several locks clicking into place. The witch isn't real. Sean always lies. I'm not a pussy. I have an overactive imagination. The vice of fear had clamped my eyes shut. However, I kept my ears open. The silence was truly deafening, and I was left to hear nothing but my pulse steadily increasing. My breathing was heavy, and I felt as though I couldn't come close to sating my own need for oxygen. My mind began to race and wander. What if Sean was right? What if the witch was real? Before I could ask any more questions, I heard something that caused everything to come to a screeching halt. Rustling through the tall grass, inching its way closer towards the center of the yard, and in turn, closer to me. My muscles locked into place, and no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't find the strength to move. My fingers were blanketed by invisible weights that I wasn't nearly strong enough to lift. I had learned in school that all animals had a fight or flight reflex, but they never teach the third option: freeze. I was frozen in every sense of the word. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The only thing I could do was listen. I listened to the tree branch tremble as my muscles violently contracted over and over again, creating tremors that ran their way down my arms, to my hands, and finally onto the branch. My legs quaked, shaking their branches and in turn adding to the rustling. I tried to quell it, take control of my own natural reflexes, all to no avail. I prayed to hear rustling through the tall grass again, making its way back towards its point of origin. I prayed that my ears had played tricks on me. My mind was playing tricks on me, creating terrifying things out of thin air. I have an overactive imagination. There's nothing around me. The only rustling I heard was from my tree. Everything was okay. I had no need to shake, to freeze, to keep my eyes closed. I opened my eyes and there was nothing, at least nothing yet. I scanned the ground beneath me and nothing. "You have pretty eyes." The gravelly voice came from beneath me, directly fucking beneath me. I frantically attempted to scan the ground again. I didn't know whether or not I even wanted to find the damn source of the voice, the rustling, the smile, all of it. What would I even do if I found it? How could I even escape? A flash of light hit my eyes as a metallic whirring sound surrounded me, followed swiftly by rustling through the tall grass back towards the house. By the time my eyes readjusted to the darkness of the night, there was a line of footsteps stomped through the grass leading to the other side of the house that I couldn't see, and quite frankly I didn't want to see. Seeing my chance to escape and refusing to stay around after whatever had just happened, short of falling, I came down the tree as fast as I could, ran straight for Tommy, turning myself in. His gaze met mine. Both of our eyes were as wide as they could physically get. We walked towards each other. He tagged me out and brought me over to my teammates, who hadn't been nearly as vigilant. We never spoke of the flashes, and I never told him about the smile, the voice, or the footsteps leading behind the house. It was better this way. Years have passed since this took place. Sean moved away and we eventually learned to love each other as brothers. And even though he still mentions being the older brother, nowadays it's much more in jest. Honestly, I had pushed this memory deep into my brain, and having never spoken of it helped keep it repressed. That was until a couple days ago, my 18th birthday. I had just arrived home from school, parked my car in front of the house, and went inside to change before leaving to go to work. There were a few birthday cards in the mail from various family members, and then there was one card that was different from the rest. There was no return address and it hadn't been postmarked. Where my address should have been placed on the envelope was simply inscribed my name. I opened the envelope, revealing a Hallmark card. The card had a birthday cake in the center with 2 children surrounding it, and written on the front were the words, "My, oh my, how you've grown." I opened the card and 2 pictures had fallen out, but before I could pick them up I saw a handwritten message in the card. "You have pretty eyes." I dropped the card and looked down at the floor to see what else came in the envelope. 2 pictures laid on the floor. One was worn out and crimping at the edges, and the other looked like it had been printed just a few days ago. My stomach dropped, and for a moment I was a kid stuck in a tree again, unable to stop shaking. I had collected myself just enough to pick up the pictures. The older one was taken from the base of the tree, and when looking closely you can see 10-year-old me, the camera flash having illuminated my eyes. The other had been taken from outside my work, and through the glare from the sun on the windows in the center of the picture was me,